Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Secular Homeschool Revolution. I'm your host, Ashley. Today we have a hot topic. I feel like I should be sitting in my chair like Wendy Williams. I miss her messy show, but I do hope her health is okay. Um, it's a hot topic because I keep seeing it on social media pages. How to start homeschooling is a big question being addressed on Facebook homeschooling groups, on Instagram homeschooling pages. It's a trending topic for TikTok homeschooling creators. And I think it's because parents may have not been fully satisfied with their kids' educational experience this year, or it may be because of all of the politics around education, or they've just always been curious on what a homeschooling lifestyle looks like and they might try it over the summer. So, we're going to talk about the legal requirements and just share tips on how to begin your homeschooling journey in Texas. I live in Texas, so I'm more familiar with Texas laws and the Texas homeschooling experience here. So, hopefully, you can gain some gems from that if you don't live in Texas. But it's still exciting that you're here and you're considering homeschooling because this is the time for you to take charge of your kids' education. So I think this episode will be super beneficial for rookie homeschoolers or people who are interested or curious. They're getting curious and asking questions. But before we dive into our topic, I always like to give an episode update. I know I haven't posted in 2 weeks, but you guys showed out because I had lost some listeners and I was like in the upper 50s, and now I'm over 70 listeners, like people who've followed my podcast page, which is crazy because I don't know. I I like my podcast show. I like my personality in it, but you're never sure if other people are going to buy into it. And I do think everyone who does take their time and energy to listen to me, and I know I've had a couple of guests, which was my husband and my daughter, and she thinks she's a podcast superstar now because some of her friends said they listened to her on her mom's podcast, and she's like, "Mom, I'm so famous." Let's see. We're in the middle of May at this point, and my bonus kid graduated from high school this past weekend. It was a rainy graduation, but they held it outside and it was raining. There's no tents or anything, so that was an experience. But we're all super proud of her. She'll be going away, so now it's like prep time to make sure she's all good so that she can enter this new phase of her life. And I got to see my mom, and I got to go on a date with my husband because my mom watched my kids. So overall, this weekend was really good. Our co-op stuff is wrapped up, so it's wrapped up, but there's still a lot of behind the scenes things that we're working on, but it's just not as much pressure at the moment because it's like we're at this break, so it feels good. Um, I went and had some drinks the other day with my friend. My husband was going out of town, so I was like, wait, I need some outlet. I need some energy. So hit up a karaoke bar. I am not a karaoke fan, but I enjoy seeing the joy of other people who are karaoke fanatics. Like like that is their joy factor. And I like to see I'm a fan of that. I am not a karaoke person, but the drinks are good. The ceviche was good. Um, and so now it's about wrapping up our homeschooling at home. We are doing year round this year, where we're doing basically like 6 weeks on and 2 weeks off, and we're getting ready to hit these 2 week breaks and do nothing but like field trips. So I'm looking forward to that. And speaking of field trips, my kid, we went to the splash pad, and I just felt so terrible. Usually we're sunblock people. I forgot my kid's sunblock. And I was like, oh, I'll just get some from another mom there. But I got there and I started talking and chatting, and I forgot to put sunblock on my kids. They were tomato red and they couldn't even lay down because they were hurting. We did cold showers, cold compressions, aloe vera. We got aloe vera gel, put it in the freezer so it could be nice and cold. And we were supposed to go on a hike with some friends, but we didn't make it because we were still too red from sunburns. So that wasn't so fun. But while my kid was healing from her sunburn, she was watching Abbott Elementary, and she was really tripping because the school didn't have money for a field trip. So the teacher, Jacob, he had to get creative, and he ended up taking them to the city park and like reserving space at the city park for the field trip. And mind you, she's never been to school, and it was Kari who was my guest last episode. And she's like, "What? Their field trips to the park?" Just so shocked because she thought and that's when the privilege starts showing, right? Because she thinks field trip Fridays are a thing that must happen every Friday. It's an experience that must happen, and she could not fathom like these kids have to like go to school every single day and they don't get to experience things. And while we recognize field trip Friday is fun, but most of the time it is a good opportunity to do an educational, outing. So she's like, they would still learn at field trips. Why can't they go? And I'm like, well, budget, money. There's a lot of variables, but that goes to show like she's just got some privilege and doesn't always understand or appreciate it. All right, I think that's all I had for my update. Because I mean, really, life has been lifing, but it's slowing down, which is really nice. But yeah, I don't think there was anything else I wanted to update you guys on. You can always follow my Instagram. It's thrifting underscore homeschool underscore mom, and you can send me a DM there. I will respond. I don't get on Instagram as much as I get on Facebook. I just don't have also the engagement. I think I think my husband just closed the door. I don't have as much engagement on Instagram like I do Facebook, but I would like to improve it. So I made a vow this summer of being more engaging on my Instagram. So it's thrifting underscore homeschool underscore mom. And if you're ever curious about our co-op that I talk about a lot, it's For the Culture Homeschool on Instagram. And I think they're tagged in a lot of my pictures. But again, I'm really, really proud of our co-op and everything that we've accomplished. We're about to start registration for our co-op, and we have so many people interested and we have limited spots. So fingers crossed that it works out the best way that it needs to work out. Okay, so now we are going to transition to what the legal requirements are for homeschooling in Texas. First things first, so we're going to talk about the legal side of homeschooling in Texas. I know that understanding legal terms can sometimes feel big and overwhelming, daunting even. But the good news is Texas is actually one of the more homeschool friendly states in the U.S. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the notification. So the notification in Texas to me sounds too good to be true, especially if you're coming from a state that has a lot of requirements or a lot of hoops to jump through. So there's nobody in the state that you have to register to let them know that you're homeschooling your kid. So if you're coming from a different state, Colorado, Arizona, and you're moving to Texas, you just start homeschooling. Once you unenroll your kid from that state, and you come to Texas, there's nothing you have to know. There's nobody you have to notify. You can just start homeschooling. Now, if you're here in Texas, your kid goes to the neighborhood school or a charter school, they're in a school district, you do have to notify the school that you're going to unenroll your kid and you're going to start homeschooling. It doesn't have to be a super well written fancy letter. You can unenroll them and notify them, verbally at the school. You could send a letter. I would suggest a certified letter, or you can do an email. I sent an email to our kids' registrar, and it was very vague. I mean, yeah, it was pretty vague, I think. To whom it may concern, I, Ashley, the parent of Parker G, is unenrolling my kid as of this date. We will begin homeschooling, and I think I put the next day. On this date, no further communication is needed moving forward. And I sent it. I did get a phone call and I let them know I'm choosing to homeschool. I legally sent them my notice of homeschooling and that there was no reason for them to contact me. My husband did go and get the school records like a week later, but it was that simple. Like I said, it feels weird that it's that simple to process the notifications here in Texas. But if you have any questions, you can definitely send me a message on my Instagram. But yeah, it's just way too good to be true. There's not a lot of heavy paperwork. You just say, hey, I'm homeschooling. Or if you've never, or like Carson, also a good example. Kari's lived in Texas her whole life, but she's never been in school, and I've never had to notify anybody that she's homeschooled. I just never put her in the school system, so there was nothing that nobody I ever needed to notify. Which I think in retrospect, right, that seems a little daunting for like the kids who may not be in a positive homeschooling experience. Like there's no way to like track those kids, which government and tracking is very sticky and icky. But yeah, I do wish there was a way that we could at least know where those kids were, or where they are at, because schools aren't at capacity right now. Public or charter, private schools aren't at capacity right now. And so I know there's a lot of kids who are doing online schools like Connections Academy, but then I do think there's a group. I saw a local news story about where are the kids, because our local school district is having to shut down, I believe, 12 schools. And I know homeschooling in our area has grown quite a bit, but we don't have the missing, 8,000 kids in our homeschool co-op group. So I do wish there was a little bit more regulation around registering kids in that way, just to make sure everyone is safe. But I do understand why people would have reasons on why they wouldn't want to be tracked in that way. But I just always want to think what would be in the best interest for kids. Legal requirements for curriculum are also very easy. The Texas law requires that your homeschooling curriculum cover 5 subjects: reading, spelling, grammar, mathematics, and good citizenship. So the good news is that you have complete flexibility to choose what that looks like for your own homeschooling journey. Because technically, when you're homeschooling, you're considered your own private school. And so you get to choose what that looks like. And if you're making your own curriculum, how you want to teach those subjects. You can use traditional textbooks. You can use online courses, or you could even use unschooling methods. Oh my gosh, speaking of unschooling, like I like unschooling if it's done well. But have y'all seen the lady on TikTok who just pulled her kids out of school and was like, I'm unschooling, and then takes them to the grocery store. And she's like, they're going to learn all these objectives. So she prefaces the video, like them going into the store, like they're going to learn all of these objectives going into the grocery store. And then she gets 2 bottles and she's like, which one has the sugar? Which one has less sugar? And the kid didn't even have time to process. And she's like, oh, we're going with this one. You're right. But the kid didn't even have the opportunity to say which had the least amount of sugar, or the reasons why that was important. And she's just going around the grocery store letting them compare products, and didn't even I don't know. I guess I just missed the whole educational point of them going to the grocery store. And I'm like, ma'am, there has been a lot of progress for rewriting the narrative of homeschooling. But here you are, a newbie being very, very loud and just wrong and like using the grocery store experience and just a way. And I think there could have been room for improvement. And so when I feel like it was like other seasoned homeschool moms who were commenting on her video, she was not being receptive. I think they were encouraging her, being very positive with their, I guess, with their advice on how that could have been a more educational experience. And she stitched some of the or responded to some of the comments like, my kids learned so much at the grocery store that day. I was like, oh, I don't ever want to be like I've said before, I never want to be the person in the room that knows everything. But she was not humble at all. But back, I'm gonna get off my tangent. But I did see cousin Tam. She's a homeschool creator on TikTok and Instagram, and I'm such a big fan of hers. She did address her video, and I got to catch her live, and I'm like, yes, this is exactly how I was feeling. Yes, you even the people who unschool who do it well, ma'am, you were making them look bad, and you're not being humble enough to even learn or grow for your own kids. So that's my unschooling rant for this week. As far as attendance goes in Texas, public school requires schools to offer students 180 days of education. In homeschooling, there is no minimum number of days that you need to homeschool each year. So this gives you full control on how to tailor your schedule to what works best for your family. So if you want to go year round, you can go year round. If you want to follow the school schedule, you can. If you want to do like a traditional homeschooling experience for 6 months and then do a full unschooling experience for the next 6 months on how you want to control what your attendance looks like, that's all on you, and you don't have to report it to anybody. I did have a friend who laid out all of her goals for her kids in the summer. And so when they started in September, she let them know, like, this is what you need to do. This is how many lessons you'll have to do per day to get to the end goal. And her oldest was completely done with all of their subjects by January. And they pretty much wrapped up homeschooling. I mean, she did some light review, but they did a lot of hands-on experiences. But their kid was so motivated to finish homeschooling, which I think is a good thing and a bad thing. Like, they're motivated to get their work done, but also it's like, are you going to get busy, get curious, get creative now? Because some kids don't know what to do with all the time to create. But I also think boredom does inspire the best creative ideas with kids. We just got to give them the opportunity to get bored instead of feeling like we have to entertain them or take them to XYZ. That the slow moments are really good too. So back to attendance, yeah, there's nobody you got to report to. There's no minimum. You don't have to follow your local public school with 180 days of educational opportunities being offered. That's completely up to you. Next, we're going to talk about record keeping. Texas law does not mandate specific record keeping for homeschoolers, but it is a good idea to keep track of your kids' progress and any samples of their work or materials that they've used. It's nice to just have that folder. I have Kia. She's our co-founder of the co-op. She has some incredible spreadsheets on how she tracks her kids' progress and assignments and grades and everything. Because I believe her daughter she keeps telling us she wants to go to high school. So she's keeping all those records for that information. Um, so I think it's better. I don't think it's that big of a deal for elementary and middle school, but it definitely is for high school because it's people are a lot of people have trouble when they transition from homeschool to public high school because that's when they have to have so many credits, and there's no law requiring Texas high schools to take any of your homeschool classes as a credit. Um, they just don't have to, and it feels like a lot of times they don't. So it's a good idea just to have some record in case they are willing to accept it at a high school level. But yeah, there's nobody you would have to turn any records to that will require it. So that's another easy thing. I don't keep extensive records. I do keep sample works of what my kids do, mainly so they could see their progress of where they started and where they are now. And so they have a file drawer in our school supply closet, but I don't keep any spreadsheets myself. But I also feel pretty committed to homeschooling on this long, we're doing this for the long haul. But as Parker, my oldest, gets closer to high school, I will up the ante and start doing more grades and stuff. So in case she wants to go to high school, but also so I can have a better practice of what her high school transcript will look like because I'll have the ability to document everything. Now we are going to talk about testing. Again, Texas has no required standardized testing for homeschoolers. However, a lot of parents do choose to offer their kids tests to gauge their progress and to make sure they're just meeting educational goals. I know there's been parents who've given their kids the old STAR tests. I know those are available online, so they'll give them the STAR test. That I think is a good idea. I don't think the STAR test is a great idea, but if you're going to use the STAR test, you do want to make sure it's based off or it's aligned with the curriculum you're using because the STAR test is based on the Texas TEKS. And so the questions that they're going to ask would be more aligned with the curriculum you're using if you're using a Texas TEKS curriculum. So it'll be an easier transition. You also could do the Iowa test. I've given my kids the Iowa test a couple years ago. You do have to pay for the test. I'm not sure what the amount is, but it's also to help gauge progress. And then you also could do the MAP test. MAP, you pay the 1 year membership and you can do the beginning of the year, middle of the year, and end of the year testing just to see where your kid has progressed or where they need assistance in. So I think we're transitioning. Several of our friends in co-op did MAP testing. So I think my family's going to transition to MAP testing as well to make sure there's no gaps, especially with Parker getting older and getting closer to high school. I want her to, especially in math, I want her to have that confidence. So we probably going into when we graduate her to the next grade, we'll offer beginning of the year testing through MAP. But for the most part, the legal side of homeschooling in Texas is really easy. It's really straightforward. If you have any questions, there are a lot of people answering them in the national group, or you can always send me a DM on Instagram. I'll be happy to help, or if I don't have the answer, provide you direction to get to the resource that will assist you in getting those answers. But yeah, the legal side of homeschooling in Texas is very gravy. Next, we're going to just kind of talk about more of the practical side of homeschooling. Research and plan. I suggest just doing research on different homeschooling methods, which could be traditional, eclectic, unschooling, Montessori. There's Walden, so there's classical. So there's a lot of different approaches to homeschooling. I think It's about finding what will resonate best with your kid and their overall learning style. I do an eclectic mix just because I feel like it best supports my kids, and I do some computer, I do some book. I'm not committed to one journey. And next, join some support groups. I love social media support groups. I have some really good friends that I've never met based from Instagram and Facebook, and even connecting with some homeschool creators on TikTok. I don't really post anything, but I do follow and comment, especially on TikTok, other homeschool moms who are just looking for support. Texas specifically has, I think, some pretty cool homeschooling groups. You can join local ones or online ones. My favorite is the Secular Decolonized Facebook homeschooling Facebook group. That one is my favorite, but that one's also like the most ruthless, honest, cutthroat one. So please don't ever ask about or suggest a curriculum that isn't secular or problematic, because they're going to let you know, like, hey, that was too whitewashed. Hey, that story was not from an authentic point of view. So that one is my ultimate favorite. And then I'm in San Antonio, so the San Antonio Homeschooling Facebook group is pretty big. And I'm also in like Black homeschoolers, several Black homeschooler Facebook groups. I'm in some Latina mom homeschooling groups. And so it's really nice because people will post different curriculums or different resources that you can borrow, and I really enjoy it. Like, I just saw the Kelly Yang front desk writing curriculum, so we're going to use that, but that was also one that was shared in a homeschooling Facebook group. Oh, a lot of people. So now we're going to talk about setting up a learning space. Wow, that looks good and it's really pretty. I don't know. I think I always redo ours at the beginning of the year for the most part, because I'm like, oh, it's a nice place, or it's a nice to have the space to go and do that. But we only end up doing school there like 1 or 2 days a week, and sometimes not at all. And we end up on the kitchen table or on the living room floor. But it's very rare that we sit in our designated area. I know, again, on social media, they make their spaces look so pretty, and they often look very expensive. But I wonder, do they do it? Do they do school in that space every day? I know sometimes we go to the park. Sometimes we're on our front porch. Sometimes we're in our back porch. Sometimes we're in bed doing our lessons. But I would say our dedicated learning space is the least used room in our house, and it's slowly becoming a storage space. Oh, create routine. Well, one of my kids thrives off routine. The other one, she's fine without it. But routine, well, I mean, flexibility is a really good benefit of homeschooling, but also having a consistent routine that gives your kids structure is helpful, because then they'll know what to expect every day. And so, I don't know. I think routines can look different for other people, right? So it could either be a schedule routine, like we get up at 8, we eat breakfast at 8:30, we start school at 9, and we're done at 12. Or it could be like we have to homeschool you have to homeschool Monday through Thursday. You have to get these done, so let's get them done. So that expectation also could be looked at as a routine. But I do think a lot of kids do thrive off of it, so that they can just know what their day to day expectations are. And there's no guessing, or, I didn't know, Mom. How was I supposed to know? Well, this is what we've been doing. Also, use community resources. Like I said, I love the library, so we borrow a lot of books from the library. We use the Canopy app, which y'all have heard me talk about a lot. It's the documentary app that you access it through your library card, and they have hundreds of cool documentaries. So we use that, and then also the Libby app, which you can access through your library card. And if they don't have Libby, then they'll probably have Hoopla, Hoopla. So you could also use Hoopla, but it doesn't have as many books. And you can't listen to as many books at one time on the account. And then you could go to museums, you could go to parks, you can go to community centers. I will say, like, a lot of times when we go to like the museums and we're going with our co-op, there's been time where it's completely free and we get the actual tour, like a tour guide to break everything down rather than us going individually and exploring the museum. So there are resources that you could use. Also for field trips or just like social activities, the community center. My kids just finished swimming lessons through the community center, but I like San Antonio's pretty cool. They got some pretty cool classes. Like Kari did the polymer clay classes from the city with our recreational centers. They're about to start offering free dance and art classes. You just have to sign up before they get waitlisted. And our San Antonio rec centers do offer homeschooling classes for like PE days. And I think there's a dance class that's also offered during the day for homeschoolers. And there's a homeschool tennis class, which we wanted to try, but I also don't want to be out in the heat right now because I know it's just going to get hotter. But yeah, so parks and museums for hands-on learning activities. Oh, and a lot of places offer homeschool days. So we did a field trip to the Johnson City Science Mill. That one wasn't free, but it was a discounted rate, and we got to experience everything that museum had to offer, which was nice. It was over an hour drive for me, but it was raining, so it took me a little bit longer. But it was definitely worth the drive. Next, I think the best advice is stay flexible because homeschooling in itself is a journey and it's that ebb and flow thing. And it's okay to make adjustments along the way. It's okay to say, hey, this just is not working. I need to pivot. I need to try something else. Because what might work for you one month might need some adjustments for the following month because your kids are growing, they're learning, you're growing, you're learning, and you just have to be open to change and be ready to adapt so that you and your kid can have a pleasant homeschooling experience and that you guys will have the ability to just enjoy learning and learning together. Also, in Texas, there is no financial support for homeschooling. So I know in other states they receive some type of funding or stipends for homeschooling. And here in Texas, we don't get that. We don't get any tax breaks. I see the conversation in the Facebook groups, especially again, because we're in San Antonio, it's a military town, and people, especially coming from California who are getting stationed here, they'll say, oh, I got a stipend through a charter in California. Does Texas offer that? And oh my gosh, Texas homeschooling moms get so triggered. They're like, absolutely not. No way. With that money comes strings attached, which I get it because I don't have to be associated with anything that's CRT, but that what they think is CRT. So, but it'll go for about 100 comments of these parents who just are like, nope, I don't want no money. I'll figure it out. I don't want the government's hands tied to my kids' education. And so those conversations can get so intense. When I see, yeah, I definitely don't want to be told on what I have to teach my kid. I feel like I'm offering them a well-rounded education. But I also am like, man, y'all are getting a couple thousand. And like some of the writing coaches take those funds, OutSchool takes those funds. So that's something to think about. I definitely don't think that'll happen in Texas anytime soon. But yeah, I do see that question being asked a lot if there's any type of funding for homeschoolers in Texas, and unfortunately, there is not at this time. So that is all for today's episode. I hope this gives you a foundation to just start your homeschooling journey in Texas. I know I didn't really touch on at all curriculums, and that is part of the starting process. I just really wanted to have more of an opportunity to discuss the legal side of homeschooling, because those are some of the biggest questions being asked on the social media, and that's where I'm taking my cues from on how to navigate my own podcast. And so I will do an episode on like online curriculums, secular history curriculums, so on and so forth. So bear with me, stick it out with me. We are getting into the planning season of what homeschooling looks like. Because even if you homeschool year round, you still are planning for when your kids graduate to the next level or grade or however you call it in your house. And so yeah, that is still wheels in motion, and I'll get there, I promise. But also, what I really want you to take away is that every family is different, every family is unique, and what works for one may not work for another. And that's okay, because that's the beautiful thing of homeschooling, is that you can tailor fit it to your family's needs and interests. I'm sharing what works for my family, and sometimes I share what doesn't work for my family, but that's an opportunity for something for you to use or not use. And if you have suggestions, always, like I said, send it to me in my DMs. I have gotten questions, which is super exciting, and I've had correspondences, and I clearly like online homeschooling communities. I like my in-person community, but I really want this podcast to start building community in that way. And understand that homeschooling, if you want to do it, there are resources, and don't be afraid to lean on people. But I just overall am thanking you with a grateful heart that you tuned in to the Secular Homeschool Revolution. And until next time, keep revolutionizing what homeschooling looks like.